Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. As I was on stream and just talking about how I wish there was more changes for classes in 10.2.5, Blizzard just announced a round of hotfixes that are coming in on the weekly reset, or I guess it's going to be on the weekly reset, where we're going to have buffs to many different healers, tanks, and DPS, starting out with Blood Decay, kind of getting more armor based off your strength, which I didn't really feel like was the primary issue for Blood Decay, but nice, so be it. Frost Decay, getting damage dealt increased by 4%. Unholy, all damage dealt by you and your pet's abilities have been increased by 4%. So huzzah, some of the underperforming DPS specs in particular getting some buffs. Yeah. Druid, rip damage increased by 10%. Rake by 5%. Primal Wrath by 10%. Feral Frenzy increased by 5%, Lunar Inspiration by 10%, and Rampant Ferocity by 25%. With Resto, and I just literally had to sit down with Resto Druids, it'll probably be up on YouTube in a couple days, getting mana buffs, where their Swiftmen, Grove Guardian, Wild Growth, Regrowth, Efflorescence are all costing a little bit less mana. Notably, Resto Druid's the only healer that's been running the Amalgam 7th Spine Trinket, which is a tremendously irritating trinket to play around because they have to rejuve the target and then just kind of leave them alone for an extended period of time until they're actually receiving that mana back. And while I don't think this is going to perfectly fix Resto Druid's mana problems, particularly in a raiding environment, kind of like nudges them in a little bit better of a direction. So, yay, huzzah. A lot of these changes thus far, as you'll see with Holy Pally getting Shield of the Righteous damage increased by 30%, Consecrate damage increased by 30%. They don't really kind of reinvent the wheel. Like, I'm shocked that Holy Pally's not getting any sort of mana changes. Because there's moments they're literally like sitting at full Holy Power doing nothing. Survival got a 4% damage buff, cool. Ret Pally, Wake of Ashes damage increased by 20%. Truce Wake by 28%, Seething Flames by 28%, Blade of Justice by 20%, and Final Verdict by 10%. I already thought Ret Pally, was doing like quite good damage, except for on Tyrannical. But these are actually the more substantial, or most substantial, I think, that we've seen out of these changes. So, damn, kind of cool. Holy Priest, I'm actually surprised that they were getting some healer changes. Holy Priest, notably, is like one of the lowest HPS, if not the lowest HPS healer in Raid right now. And I thought they actually just forgot about him. So, Holy Word Sanctifies healing has been increased by 25%. Healing has been increased by 25%. And Flash Heal by 15%. Notably, this is the first time, I think since early at the start of the expansion, where heal has been buffed more than Flash Heal, because usually they kept them in proportion with each other, and since they were kind of in proportion, it was like, well, what's the point of going into something like Lightweaver if you could just be hitting Flash Heals instead? So I don't know if you'd really go into Lightweaver at this point, since it is just GCD intensive to build up, maintain, track, utilize, but hey, maybe. The thing is, this doesn't really like fix Holy Priest's problem of like spread AoE healing in a 5-man environment. And in like a raid, yeah, I mean, you just keep on cranking the Sanctify number up higher and higher and higher, and yeah, you'll be in a pretty good place. A lot of these changes, notably, they didn't buff anything with Holy Fire, because Holy Fire is tremendous damage in dungeons. But they buffed Chastise, Smite, and Shadow Word Pain on this one. So that's where it's kind of interesting. And you kind of like circle it back to like the resto changes, where like it kind of like nudges these specs in like a bit healthier of a direction, I guess, and kind of like nudges them a little bit more into like fixing some of the issues that they had. But I don't think this like reinvents the wheel for Resto Druid, or like solves the problems that they have. It certainly helps. I'm like shocked by the Holy Pally changes again, because yeah, more damage is nice, but as we've seen in this M+ season, healer damage is not the like primary thing as to what makes a healer good in high M+. It's actually being able to survive one-shots and help your teammates survive one-shots. And I mean, I would even argue Holy Pally has a bit of an output issue compared to some of the other top healers in an M+ environment, where yeah, you're playing around your cooldowns, but after all the nerfs Holy Pally sustained, they're actually not getting any sort of HPS changes to them, which is super, super weird. Shadow Priest. Oh my god, I thought they forgot about this guy. Mind Blast damage increased by 10%, Devouring Plague by 10%, Shadowy Apparition by 20%, Psychic Link, which I think is like their cleave, right? Now causes direct damage spells to inflict 30% of their damage on all other targets afflicted by your Vamp Touch, was 25%. Seem to remember Shadow Priest not liking Psychic Link, so we'll see what it actually ends up doing. Yeah, I do think Holy Pally needs to have, like... I really think Holy Pally needs to get rid of Holy Power and then make Shield of the Righteous, Word of Glory, and Light of Dawn all, like, share their charge system and have 2 charges. And so you can kind of pick and choose which one you utilize, but, like, make them actually really strong. Because when you can kind of just spam them if you have the Holy Power for it, they've, like, watered down Holy Power spenders, like, so much. It's just... ugh, it's just atrocious. Resto Shaman. Oh, the 5% healing increase. I swear, every single time that they make changes to Resto Shaman, it's like, here's 3% healing, here's 4% healing, here's 5% healing, right? They also are getting damage increases, but they're not getting any damage increases to Acid Rain, which I think has been buffed like 300% this expansion or something like that. Lava Burst damage increased by 20%, Flame Shock by 20, and Lightning Bolt by 20. So these are kind of interesting, and again, following the same line as what we saw out of Holy Priest, where it's like the active damage spells are getting buffed. I don't know if this is some kind of attempt to try to, like, bring specs closer together when actively DPSing, I guess, for 5-mans, question mark? Because, I mean, Holy Priest was already doing tons and tons of damage in a 5-man. And it was mainly in a raid where, like, Disc Priest just, like, annihilated everybody else, and nothing's really been done about that. So that's kind of where I'm confused, but, like... hey, like, I'm not upset that Resto's getting more damage. I'm not upset that Holy Priest is getting more damage. I just don't really understand what the goal is through a lot of those changes, you know? And honestly, I feel like while I was expecting Holy Priest to get kind of forgotten, and I'm glad, you know, especially for raiding, that Sanctify is getting some heal increases, yeah, like, still surprised that there's been no change to Salvation's cooldown, or even just making Salvation hit a little harder. Notably, having, like, 3 Prayer of Mending stacks instead of the 2 Prayer of Mending stacks, I think would be a solid change. But also with Holy Pally, like, again, I just circle back to this, I'm just super confused that Holy Pally's getting nothing else. Because, I mean, that spec, like, literally went extinct in M+. It went from, like, the only healer, and now there's, you know, Mistweaver, there's a good mix of Mistweaver, Resto Druid, and Disc Priest, and really high in M+. Boy, Holy Pally just went to the chop shop. To round out these changes, arms, cleave damage increased by 10%, Dreadnought by 30, Deep Wounds by 15, and the Emirito 4 set, bonus damage for the triggered Thunderclaps increased to 200% instead of 100%. Prop Pally, Vanguard now grants a 40% increase to stamina, and Ignore Pain Absorbed increased by 5%. So interesting. Again, from my perspective, healing in Pugs, I've healed with some Prop Pallies lately, I've healed some Blood Decays lately. I was a little surprised to see survivability changes coming in for them, because I didn't really feel like that was the issue that those tanks had. Like, maybe they could deal more damage, and, like, that would be another way of making up the value in an M+ run. If, you know, hey, you don't have as much mob control as a Prop Pally or a VDH, but hey, you kill things faster, huzzah, right? But I've yet to see, like, good Blood Decay players really struggling with their survivability, but I guess I could be wrong on that one since they're receiving some buffs. But I definitely think Holy Pally has some really weird shocker changes. I'm kind of surprised Preservation Evoker also isn't really getting much else in the way of changes. Like, I was really expecting to see more. I was actually expecting to see Mistweaver nerfs, I'm not gonna lie. I was expecting to see some Mistweaver output nerfs, since it seemed like they followed the trend of, like, let's make sure we balance output. But, like, Holy Pally is not far from Holy Priest in these overall statistics. That's all percentiles. 95th percentile, you know, you can still see a massive gap, but the range, I think, is always super important to be able to look at for these changes. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure. And, of course, you know, some mana change is going to help as well with our Druid. I'm glad that Pres Evoker is also just cranking output, but it's also one of those healers that kind of just lives and dies by doing more output than everybody else. So, yeah, a little bit surprised on that end. But even, yeah, I'm also just surprised not seeing more, like, damage equalization across the board. Yeah, it's kind of troll. But anyway, sub to the YouTube if you're enjoying these quick updates. Thanks for tuning in to our fast update on these class changes. You can find them on Wowhead and in the description down below. And there's more player versus player changes, which I'm sure some other gamers are going to check out. All right, GG's, guys.